Hello everyone. Okay, this video corresponds with the essay Invite the view that checks and balances are no longer effective, and it corresponds to the essay which I wrote in time conditions on this when you lot were writing yours. Okay, from marking them, there were a number of issues which people seem to have forgotten about how to do these politics essays. You've got to remember there's 3 assessment objectives, 1, 2 and 3. Each one's worth 10 marks. AO1 is about knowledge, AO2 is analysis, and AO3 is conclusions. Conclusions should be in every single paragraph, not only with the word therefore. It's often quite a good conclusive word. The analysis is where you explain to the marker, the person reading it, why are the examples you've given showing checks and balances are effective or not effective for this type of question. Why are you saying that they are effective as a whole or not effective as a whole? So it's the whys, I suppose, and then knowledge obviously is knowing stuff. Right, the first thing, a number of people in their introduction did not have a clear argument. It is essential that you have a clear argument. You can't get more than about 10 out of 30 if you do not have an argument right from the start, which is crystal clear. So if you look at my introduction, it is a little phrase that might say it is clear, but if it does the job, it is clear that checks and balances are still effective today. You could equally say checks and balances are not effective today. But whatever you do, whatever the essay is, make that argument crystal clear. So there's no doubt in the person marking it, they know exactly what your argument is. Right, the paragraph structures, again, just to remind you all, what you should do is have 3 paragraphs. Again, it depends how quick you can write. If you're a bit of a slow writer, I'd rather do 2 paragraphs well than do 3 kind of not so well, because you'll get more marks for it. Each paragraph should start out with the argument which supports your point of view with one of the points. You should then have a counter argument, i.e. the other side of the argument, to say actually what's weak about your argument, and then the end bit should be the counter argument. Why is that counter argument? Why is the criticism of your point wrong, and why is your point better? So if you look at my paragraph, my first one, I'm saying the main argument says the checks and balances are still effective, so that links in direct to the question. They're still effective. It links into my argument. I think they're effective. If you think they're not, you said the main argument suggests that checks and balances are not effective. Okay, and then I've put in on the point I'm going to talk about, which is about the appointment process requiring Senate approval. If you look at my argument, it's a little bit long, to be fair, but I have said why the appointment system is a check on the president. I've then given at least 2 examples. Again, the examples seem to like 2 examples. I think on the mark scheme they called it comparative examples or something. So again, have an example for blah 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 blah. This is similar to blah 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 blah. Okay, so again, have 2 examples. This example is similar to this example, and they both show that the appointment system in my case is effective. So I've done that. I've then got a little therefore, which highlights a conclusion, which is AO3. This is a real weakness on the real exam papers when this was done. Therefore, this shows that checks and balances are no longer are effective because all these various people have been checked by the US Senate. Okay, I've then done my counter argument. However, a weakness of this view. That's quite a good little phrase to use. Use whatever your favourite one is. But I think however is quite a good line. And the counter argument should be on the same point as your first half. So my first half is about appointments being good. So my counter argument needs to also be about appointments. But about appointments perhaps being no longer as effective. So I put in here the examples about Trump with the acting Homeland Security guy. I put in about the partisanship around appointments to the Supreme Court, suggesting that this is an argument that says that the appointments check has been weakened. It's been either exploited in various ways. And again, it's got 2 examples in there, and then it has a therefore. So that little argument's got a therefore as well. And then the final bit of doing this paragraph then say, but this is a fundamentally weak view because my view is actually better because. So I think I've argued having a that there's not many acting secretaries. Yeah, that's my main argument, wasn't it, to say why I've discounted that view. So there's 3 points to every paragraph. Main argument, couple of examples in there. Make sure you say why your main argument answers the question. Must have a therefore to act as AO3. Then there's a counter argument. However, a weakness of this view is the counter argument needs to be on the same point being made in your first half. That's where students often go wrong. Again, a couple of examples in there is great. Okay. And then you must have a point to then say, but why do you reject that counter argument? Why is your original view so much better? Okay, and that same thing was happening for both the other paragraphs as well. As I said, if you're a slow writer, it's better to do 2 paragraphs which are long and do these 3 things than do 3 that don't do these things. But if you have a look through my essay, I've done the same for paragraph 2 and the same for paragraph 3. Now, the other issues some people had with this question, they're a bit vague on what the checks and balances actually were, which is quite surprising. And then people would say, have like one half saying about Congress hasn't declared war, this shows they're really bad, yada, yada, yada. But then the counter argument would be about vetoes or something. What are they connected to each other? If you look at the checks and balances, there are some natural families of checks and balances, aren't there? So there's a number of checks and balances around the issue, for example, of passing laws and dealing with lawmaking. So you've got the veto, you've got Congress can amend, delay, destroy legislation introduced by the President. The President, of course, cannot introduce legislation. Well, he can, but he can't kind of force it through, if that makes sense. What else have we got on passing laws? Yeah, so they're the main ones, right? Other ones as well. Okay, but there's a family. There's 2 or 3 checks and balances I've just mentioned there about Congress and the President and their checks to have on each other regarding lawmaking. So again, they're like a family of checks and balances. So I've put that into one paragraph. My paragraph 2 is about this little family of checks and balances around there. I've done a little family of checks and balances around foreign policy. So the President is Commander-in-Chief, but is limited by Congress, who has the money, basically. But Congress can also declare war, which is also a limitation on the President's ability to use the troops as and when he likes. What I haven't mentioned in this paragraph actually is about treaties and how they require the approval of the Senate as well, thinking about it. So there's a family of checks and balances around that issue, isn't there? Okay, and then because I wrote quicker than you lot, I did a little mini 4th paragraph. It wasn't the best one, on judicial review. I found it quite difficult to think of, and I would say it wasn't effective. So yeah, that wasn't my best paragraph. But I'm just aware that a lot of them were just about Congress checking the President. But the question hasn't specified, it just said checks and balances, so that'd be fine. So can you see that every paragraph has these 3 things to it? Argument, which supports the point of view I'm making. Why that's so weak, what's the counter argument to that same point, and then why do I reject that counter argument, and my main argument is wonderful. And then the final thing is the conclusion. Conclusions should do a couple of things. Firstly, state your argument again. I always do you should then really say what the main counter argument is. So you should say something like, overall, it is clear that checks and balances are still effective today. However, it has been argued that, and then put the main arguments made in the main part of the essay, which goes against that point of view. So they're not effective because Congress hasn't declared war since 1941. The President has had these acting secretaries of state of recently to get around checks and balances. The whole world is terrible, blah, 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 blah. And then you must say why you reject that. Although these views do have some merit, actually, most people have been appointed to the US systems, have had Senate approval. Yes, Congress hasn't declared war since 1941, but actually they've voted for the money towards many of these conflicts, such as Iraq and Afghanistan. So therefore, these checks are still in place, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that's what you need to do. What quite a few people's essays did, they kind of talked about generalities about tyranny and George III. Someone had James II. I just wonder what he's got to do with the whole story. Just stick to the checks and balances, okay? Making sure that each paragraph rigidly sticks to those checks and balances. You state what the checks are that you're discussing, say why they're effective, why they're not effective, and have a good splashing of examples. Okay, any problems or issues, that let me know. But it's the same structure for every essay, apart from, this is for Unit 1 and Unit 2, the UK ones, apart from those comparative answers. I tried to call them answers, not essays. because you do those differently. Okay, in fact, I might make a video based on one of those later in the week, possibly.